Hello, my name is Creed, and welcome to Writer's Blockbuster. Today we're going to be talking about the Puppet Master prequel called Toulon's Revenge. In this film, we learn a lot about the origins of the puppets, as well as the reasons why the puppets and the Puppet Master himself are the way that they are. If you'd like to watch the events of Puppet Master 1 and 2, then I'll leave links for those videos down in the description, but otherwise, go ahead and buckle up while we talk about what happens in Puppet Master 3, Toulon's Revenge. Also, there will be spoilers in this breakdown, so you've been warned. We open in Nazi-occupied Berlin in 1941. Major Kraus exits his vehicle, leaving his sidekick, Lieutenant Erich Stein, who we learn is a puppeteer, to stand watch. Inside, we meet Dr. Hess, a doctor and scientist who has been tasked to find a way to reanimate the dead. We watch as his current patient dies, only to spring back to life a few moments later and attack Dr. Hess. But before the living corpse can kill the doctor, Kraus shoots it, and we get our title card. After the opening credits, we see Andre Toulon, the Puppet Master himself, enacting a show for a laughing audience. In the show, we meet a new puppet named Six Shooter, and watch his harrowing performance as he takes down Hitler. We see Lieutenant Stein in the back, snapping photos, and after the show, he confronts Toulon, telling him to stop his puppet shows and insinuating that there will be major consequences if he doesn't. Once Stein leaves, he hears Toulon and his wife speaking to someone. He peeks his head in the window and sees the living puppets walking and interacting with Toulon and his wife. He watches as Toulon injects a green fluid into the dolls before Stein loses his balance and falls, making quite a ruckus and forcing himself to flee before Toulon catches him.
Clumsy, clumsy. You're so clumsy.
That night, Toulon gifts Elsa with a puppet that he made in her image. They talk all lovey-dovey to each other, saying that each couldn't live without the other and definitely not setting us up for a scene of heartbreak and loss in the future. Stein goes back to Major Kraus and Dr. Hess and shows them the photos, telling them that he thinks Toulon may have the answers that they are looking for. Kraus wants to kill Toulon for mocking the regime, but Dr. Hess calls their boss the General, saying that he needs Toulon alive so that they can work together on reanimation. Later, Kraus and his men burst into Toulon's home and put a stop to all future performances.
Your career as an entertainer is over here.
The men pick up Toulon's puppets before they notice the vials of green liquid on his shelf. Elsa tries to stop the men and moves to grab the vial, but she's shot in the back.
Nice shot!
Or maybe in the chest. In one scene it's the back, and then I think in reality it's supposed to be the chest, but it was just kind of poorly done. So Elsa's shot in the chest, and it's very sad. The men drag Toulon away from his injured wife, and just before Kraus leaves, she spits on his boots, and Kraus in return turns and shoots Elsa, ending her life. While being escorted to the Gestapo, one of the soldiers examines Toulon's puppets, only to have Pinhead come to life and choke the man. Tunneler then drills through the front seat and into the driver's belly, causing the car to crash and allowing Toulon to escape. The general gets a call and informs Kraus that his prisoner has escaped, insinuating that Kraus is on thin ice and his next mistake could be his last. Kraus goes back to the Toulon studio, but doesn't find the Puppet Master. He breaks the Hitler puppet before ordering his men to burn the place to the ground. Also, just as a side note, they return to this location quite a few times during the film, and never once did I notice any fire damage here, so I guess they just burned down the puppet stage and nothing else got affected or something like that. I don't know, your guess is as good as mine when it comes to that department. Sometime later, Toulon returns to his home and reunites with Six Shooter and Jester. We see Dr. Hess examining Toulon's serum.
Herr Toulon, you are a genius.
Toulon finds an old apothecary to hide in for the night and finds a jar filled with leeches, which gives him an idea. He turns to his puppets and gives an awesome speech.
No thing will stop me from seeking you out and making each one of you at your knees for what you have done. And you will cry me mercy, and I will have none.
No mercy, my friends.
No mercy.
That night, Pinhead and Jester break into the morgue. The mortician is checking one of the corpses when Pinhead jumps at him from behind and chokes him out. The puppets open the door, allowing Toulon to enter. He finds the body of his wife and begins to collect her life essence. While he's doing so, another mortician walks in and tries to call for help. Pinhead pulls the phone cord and Jester runs at the man's shin with a scalpel, incapacitating him and allowing Toulon and the puppets to escape. Toulon mixes up another batch of his serum and injects it into the puppet he had made in his wife's image. He also infuses her with leeches, and when the puppet springs to life, we see that this is the origin of Leech Woman.
My name is
Leech Woman.
and I like to party.
Major Krause meets up with Dr. Hess again, leaving Stein to watch the car. While the lieutenant is checking the engine, Jester suddenly surprises him. He falls to the ground when Pinhead smashes him in the face with a wrench. We then watch as Leech Woman climbs onto the fallen man and spits leeches all over his face. Dr. Hess is having some minor successes with Toulon's serum, but he and the Major are both frustrated because the experiments are only lasting a few minutes. Hess is convinced that with Toulon's help, they could work out a way to make the serum permanent and urges Major Krause to continue looking. When he exits, the Major is told that Lieutenant Stein is dead. He goes to examine the body, and we see the man is covered in leeches. Also, his eyes move, and he breathes, but ignore that, I promise you he's dead. The Major gets a call that his men have found Toulon's current hideout, but they haven't found the Puppet Master himself. The General meets with Dr. Hess and is not happy with his lack of progress. When the General leaves, we see Pinhead hiding just outside the Doctor's quarters and watches where the General goes. We see Toulon dress up as a blind beggar, using his disguise to sneak past a Nazi patrol and release Six-Shooter to climb up the side of the building. Totally unassisted with strings or anything of that sort. I guess these are just like old Spider-Man webs left behind or something like that. The General is exiting a room when he sees the puppet standing in the hallway. He's not afraid at first, but then Six-Shooter shoots at him and the General grabs for his gun. The General's able to shoot off one of Six-Shooter's arms, but the puppet comes out on top, putting a few into the General's chest and causing the man to fall out the window and die. Back at Toulon's third and final hideout, he meets a boy named Peter and his father, who were both at the puppet show back at the beginning of the film. Toulon agrees to let them stay, saying that they are all now fugitives and that they must stick together. Dr. Hess and Major Krause go to investigate the General's murder. There, Hess finds a bullet embedded in the wall that is far smaller than any bullet they've seen before.
I've never seen a bullet this small.
The doctor says that the shooter must have been just down the hallway, and there they find Six-Shooter's arm, and then they realize that the killer was not a man at all, but a puppet. Major Krause puts out a bounty for Toulon, promising $10,000 for whoever turns him in. Dr. Hess asks what Krause intends to do if they do capture Toulon, and Krause says that he will be immediately executed without question. Dr. Hess tries to convince the Major that he needs Toulon alive, but he won't hear it. He instead informs the doctor that he will now be placed under constant supervision to ensure his loyalty and assigns a soldier to guard and watch him at all times. Toulon is working on a new puppet during the night when Peter walks in. The boy asks what Toulon plans to do to fix Six-Shooter, but Toulon tells him that there's nothing that they can do with the supplies that they have. Toulon also shows the boy the puppet that he's working on, and we see that it's Blade, and we also learn that Blade has been made in the image of Major Krause. When Peter goes to bed that night, we see his father looking at Toulon's bounty poster, and we get the feeling that devious intentions may be afoot. Before the grown-ups wake up, Peter sneaks out of the hideout to go and get supplies for Toulon. The boy sneaks into Toulon's old studio, but unfortunately it's at the same time that Dr. Hess has decided to go and check for clues about Toulon's serum. The doctor finds the boy hiding in a closet and realizes that he must be retrieving supplies for Toulon. Hess gives the boy something to eat, and he convinces him that he means no harm to Toulon and only wants to work together with him to find the answer of reanimation. Peter takes Dr. Hess and the guard to the hideout, and Hess orders the guard to stay outside. When Hess meets with Toulon, they speak about the intricacies of the serum and Toulon tells the man that he found the secret concoction while on his visit to Egypt. Hess asks Toulon why his serum hasn't been working on the dead soldiers, and the puppet master informs the man that each puppet was created with the life force of those who wanted to continue to fight. And it's here that we learn a lot about who the puppets used to be. Jester was a man named Hans, who was a bookkeeper that loved to play pranks and tell jokes. He was killed by the Nazis when his jokes went too far. Tunneler was a man named Joseph, and was a soldier who was forced to work in the Nazi salt mines until he died. And Pinhead was a man named Herman, who was a truck driver that secretly brought food to the Jewish ghettos, and as a result, he was killed by the Nazis for being a traitor. We cut over to see Peter's father speaking with Major Krause and making a deal to trade Toulon in exchange for safe passage out of Berlin for him, Peter, and his wife. Krause agrees, and the father leads the men to Toulon's hideout. Peter's father goes into the hideout first and gets Peter out before the soldiers enter. The first soldier is hit in the face with a brick by Pinhead. As the next soldier enters, some fire is exchanged before Tunneler runs into the soldier's shin, causing the man to fall to the ground. Leech Woman is perched just above the man and begins to drop leeches all over his face before one lands directly into his open mouth, killing him instantly. While Toulon and Hess are escaping, Major Krause stops Peter and his father and accuses them of informing Toulon that the soldiers were coming and helping them escape. Peter's father yells at his son to run before he goes for Krause's gun. The two men struggle for a moment before Krause pulls the trigger and Peter's father is killed. A soldier tries to stop Toulon and Hess, but is shot by six-shooter. Hess goes to check the man and make sure he's dead, but the soldier springs to life and in one final effort, he stabs Hess. Hess tells Toulon to keep fighting before he passes away. Toulon escapes to his old puppet studio and falls asleep. A bit later, Peter walks in and wakes up the old puppet master, telling him that he wants to help in whatever way he can and he wants to become the man's assistant. We cut to see Major Krause enter his office. He tries to make a phone call but finds that the line has been cut. While searching for the reason, he sees Jester sitting on the desk with a pair of scissors. He gets up to stop the puppet, but is cut down by Blade, who is now rocking with the life essence of Dr. Hess himself.
I'm a doctor too.
Toulon reveals himself in the shadows, and Major Krause shoots him in the shoulder before Pinhead knocks him over the head with a brass plate. Toulon throws ropes, each tied with metal hooks, over the hanging light, and we watch as Pinhead stabs the hooks into the Major's arms, legs, and neck. Toulon then pulls on the rope, pulling the Major off of his feet and causing him to become a living human puppet. Pinhead places a halberd just under the Major, and we see its sharp prongs pointing at the hanging man. Toulon lights a fire just beneath the rope, forcing the Major to watch as his death inevitably approaches. The flames lick at the rope until it snaps, and Krause falls onto the halberd, ending the man's evil reign. We cut to some time later, and Toulon uses the Major's credentials to get a train ticket out of Berlin. He and another passenger share some small talk.
Have you enjoyed Berlin?
No, I have not. I had a very unpleasant experience. I am recuperating.
I hope you're well now.
Well, some people lost their heads, but friends saw me through.
And we see that Peter has joined Toulon and is now his permanent assistant. Toulon and Peter head to Switzerland and say that they plan to head to America shortly after that. But that will have to wait until the next movie, because that is where this one ends. Now listen, I'm a sucker for origin stories. I always love the superhero origin stories, and seeing the Puppet Master origin story has been awesome. Like, I love understanding the Puppet Master himself. I love understanding each of the puppets individually and understanding their, like, dichotomy together, right? It's super interesting. It builds on everything that was talked about in the previous films, except for the dates. The date is all messed up in this one because Toulon committed suicide in 1939, and this movie takes place in 1941, and Toulon is still alive. We'll talk about that later, or maybe we won't, but I definitely felt like this movie has something special going for it. Like, it's a cool period piece, it has that really nice origin, it gives us a lot of information about Toulon, this figure that we've been just hearing about for 2 movies straight now, and I just really, really liked it. It's hard to say if I like this one or the second one more at this point. You know, of the 3 movies that I've reviewed so far, I think this one is a little bit more my favorite than the second one was, but it's by a smidge. It's barely. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed as well, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like as well as subscribe so you don't miss out on the next one. And yeah, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.